Hello again. Welcome back. We have returned from our 1 week hiatus of celebrating America 250 to to the airwaves. I guess. Do they still use that phrase, airwaves? Because I'm not technically doing radio right now. I don't know. But the point is, we're back, and we're happy to have you here today. Obviously, a lot has happened in the last 2 weeks. Nothing unusual there, but we are marking the remembrance, I suppose, of an event that is sadly becoming less unusual in American culture and American politics right now. Yesterday was 2 years since Butler, the assassination attempt on President Trump and the murder of Corey Comparator. As you can see from the shirt, I was there. I hesitate to wear it because I don't feel like advertising it because it was a horrible event, but it's very important to remember what happened that day. So we'll discuss that. Um, Uncovered some evidence that my wife is a superhero, which I already knew, but now I have some harder evidence for it. And to start us off, we have a dose of reality about the current administration. I've called these in past episodes called these Trump wins, and they are Trump wins, but um, the fact that Trump is winning isn't or accomplishing good things isn't entirely my point right now. As we begin the show here today, my point is that it is indeed very popular to kind of crash out on social media right now about this administration. We've discussed this already. Bad news sells, right? So that's part of the motivation behind the doomers and black pillars that we have in American politics today. And it's also a matter of the reality that these people there isn't room for these influencers to grow their power structure and their money income if MAGA succeeds, right? Because then MAGA continues to steer the ship in the Republican Party, so to speak. So it's very important and very popular for these people right now to talk about things that they think demonstrate how poorly Trump 2.0 is going. And what I've been trying to do and what I will continue to do here on this show is to provide the counterbalance for that, right? There are certainly things about Trump 2.0 that I don't have yet that I want. And there are certainly things that Trump 2.0 has done that I probably disagree with. That's not my point. My point is most of the news that you're getting out there about Trump coming from the right, maybe not most, but a ton of it is so one-sided. People So many people don't bother to think about the good things or talk about the good things that Trump 2.0 has accomplished so far. At least that's the way it is in my life. The bad news about Trump 2.0 or the false bad news about Trump 2.0 shows up in my life on its own. I have to go looking for the other side of the story, which I would argue is much more factual and the majority of the facts as well. But I still have to go looking for it, even though it's actually true news and much more frequent than you would believe. I have to go and find it. So that's what I'm trying to do here with these Trump wins on our show, is to remind you that this good news exists. It is the majority of what the Trump is doing, and it is available for you if you go and look for it. But I'm trying to skip the go and look for it part for you. If you don't want to go and look for the good news, you can just tune into this show. I would still recommend, of course, that you do your own research. But the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of good facts out there that just aren't showing up in the places that I find the news, right? So I want to provide an outlet for you to find these true facts that I, at least, am having a hard time finding anywhere else. For example, back on July 1st, I know it's been a minute, but back on July 1st, there was an announcement that 10,000 illegal immigrants had been deported in just 5 days prior to July 1st. That's an example of something that the Trump administration is not getting enough credit for, right? Did you know, for example, that the wall is continuing to be built? border wall, the border barriers, the structures, and the technology in some places where the terrain is so rough that it prohibits a structure being built. The border is being physically, as much as is possible, physically sealed. So the illegal immigration flow has basically stopped, but there is permanent infrastructure and in many cases, physical hardware that is still being built all across our southern border that will be there after Trump 2.0 is over. Did you know that? Perhaps not, because that's good news that doesn't get covered enough. Now, what about deportations, right? Sealing the border isn't enough. Deportations need to happen. I would argue that it might be time to think about ramping up the speed of deportations again. Hopefully, the announcement on July 1st is an indicator of just that. But whether or not you are pleased with the rate of deportations, don't pretend like deportations have stopped or that Trump has somehow given up on his promise to deport illegal aliens. 10,000 in 5 days doesn't happen unless Trump 2.0 is accomplishing good things. How about inflation? That's a much more recent number. It just came out just this morning. June inflation dropped by 0.4%, which means that the national inflation has dropped down to 3.5%. That drop was the biggest monthly drop since April of 2020. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I am not an economist expert, right? But I understand what inflation is. Inflation means that there's too many dollars. They're too common, so they lose their value. And if inflation gets out of hand, then your $100 doesn't buy you as much as your $100 should. And that particularly becomes a problem when the value of your money is decreasing faster than your pay increase can compensate for it, and your raises can compensate for it, right? Biden created an utter disaster of inflation. Now, to be honest, to be fair, a lot of that happened, or a bunch of it happened during COVID, right? That got the inflation bubble during Trump 1.0, that got the inflation bubble rolling. But then after the worst of the COVID economic impact had blown over, Biden's administration continued, and inflation continued to be a disaster. And now, here in June, it has had the biggest drop since April of 2020. So some good news there. Just some little happy nuggets for you. That sounds really suspicious. What on earth is a happy nugget? I don't know. But what I am doing is I am reminding you that there are a lot of reasons to be excited about Trump 2.0. That is the reality of the world in which we live. For many reasons, that news is not going to be readily available to you. If you get your news in a situation like I do, like I say, I have to go and look for it. So please continue to educate yourself. Come to the show. I can do some of the work for you. I can also recommend to you some other places where you can go and look for good news. I would recommend the Dan Bongino Show. His videos exclusively on Rumble, his audios on Spotify, and there's video on demand on Rumble too. That is a good place to get some of the facts that a lot of the right-wing media is choosing to ignore right now. Check out the Dan Bongino podcast. And anything related to the FBI official accounts on X is a great source of too, whether it's Kash Patel, the FBI Rapid Response account. Find the official FBI accounts on X if you want hard numbers, factual data about consequences, right, for the deep state, arrests for criminals, and consequences for the deep state. There you can follow what Trump 2.0 is doing for accountability for the people who have screwed us over so badly in the criminal world and the deep state world, if there is any difference. And you will find a lot of facts on there that are good news, right? So please try to keep yourself balanced. There are things that haven't happened from Trump 2.0 that we want yet, that we want to happen. But we also need to be honest about the good things that happen. Don't get sucked into this whirlpool of discouragement and deception about what Trump is accomplishing just because that is what people are producing on social media because it gets them engagement, right? Do some of the work yourself to find those facts, whether it's Bongino or FBI official accounts on X, and then come to my show and I'll do some of the work for you. Speaking of doing work for me, my wife is far more handy than I am. And over this break, when we've been away from the show, she proved it again by hanging a door without assistance. Not that I could have provided her much assistance anyway, but um, my point here is that I was very, very impressed that my wife has the capacity to do that. I don't know. That's probably a little bit of a way that I break some stereotypes about a conservative Christian person, right? For most people, would assume, if they don't know the conservative Christian world any better, that that's a man's job, right, to do the stuff around the house. Not so at my house. The handyman jobs go to my wife because she has the skills and the confidence and at times the insanity to try things that I wouldn't even be brave enough to start. She told me she wanted to put this door in. I'm like, do you know how to hang a door? And she's tried it a couple of times before with, now that I look back on it, increasing levels of success. So I shouldn't have doubted her, but I was like, oh boy, she's going to tear the door off the hinges. I hope she can put the new one on it. And she did. It is, and she did a beautiful job. So there's some life lessons in there for you, right? Um, don't be afraid of letting your wife try things because she might surprise you about how competent she is, right? So don't underestimate your wife just because it's a traditionally masculine job around the house, but also take the time to publicly trumpet your wife's successes because if I had hung a door by myself, I would want my wife to brag about it in front of her friends. So here I am bragging about my wife because she deserves it, right? My wife is an impressive woman, and I'm going to take every opportunity that I get to say that in public. So love you, babe. Keep fixing things up around the house because if you don't, we're going to have to hire someone to do it for us. So appreciate you. You're the best woman I know. That's why I married you. On a more somber note, yesterday was 2 years since the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. That was within what, a quarter of an inch, probably less, of taking the life of President Trump. That did take the life of Corey Comparator and seriously injured David Dutch and James Copenhaver, who were also rally attenders that day. I was there. I was working the rally as at the time a brand spanking new employee with Early Vote Action here in Erie County, where I live. Butler, Pennsylvania, is a couple hours south of me. So I went down for the rally. Um, one of the hottest jobs I've ever had. Like people were passing out like left and right. And I was working the morning shift, and I felt really bad for the emergency services there that day because they were running around in their long black pants and black t-shirts, right, trying to help these people who were overheating. My job was to shuttle people through or guide people through that like cattle chute with fencing that they use. If you've been to a Trump rally, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and hand out waters. And I handed them out just as fast as I could get them, right? And so for whatever reason that day, I had decided that I was going to work the morning shift and then take advantage of like my volunteer pass to get to the closer to like skip the regular admission line and get closer to the stage. I normally don't do that. When I go to a Trump rally, I usually just work the whole crowd coming in. And by that point, there's no point in trying to get in to watch. It's pretty much full. So I kind of stay on the outskirts of the rally and then work the crowd on the way back out. This time I chose not to do that. I wanted to get close to this rally. So I did. I went through not the VIP entrance, but like the volunteer pass entrance, whatever. So the vast majority of the line I skipped, but not all of it. Um, I was supposed to be seated in the bleachers off to Trump's right, but by the time I got there, they had let too many people into the bleachers, and there was no room for me in the bleachers anymore. So I ended up being on ground level, maybe, gosh, I don't know, maybe 50 feet away from where Corey Comparator was seated and standing throughout the rally. Kind of sobering, right? When you realize that, when I realized after the fact, at first I was just thinking about how close, the bullets would have passed almost directly in front of me and overhead to some degree, how close I had been to actually being seated in the area where Corey was seated. I was supposed to be seated in that area that day. So definitely sobering when you look back on it. But there, I want to pause and I want to make clear that I don't tell this story to kind of try to paint myself as some kind of hero, right? I didn't do anything heroic that day. I don't have any inside scoop of what happened that day. If you've watched the footage, you know most and read the accounts, you know most of everything that happened that I do. There's nothing special about my presence there. I was working. I was being paid, right? And I was, and my work put me in a position to be closer. That's all. Um, in some ways, I consider it. Well, in many ways, I consider it an honor to have been there, to been able to see the miraculous deliverance that I believe God gave to President Trump and to our country that day, to see it in person. But I don't want this to come off as, I have some kind of survivor PTSD guilt or something like that. That's not the case. They missed me, right? And they weren't aiming for me anyway. But my point here is to honor the people who were injured that day and to remember what happened so that we can confront it for what it is, which is a pattern that exists in our present today, not an event, not just an event that took place 2 years ago. I can tell you that uh, the security failures that day were real. Um, one of them that occurred to me in my trained civilian eye was while I was waiting, the perimeter fencing. I don't know what layer of perimeter it was, right? Because I don't understand the full technicalities of Secret Service security, but it was a perimeter fencing. It came right around behind those bleachers where I was supposed to be sitting and crossed just to and went past me just to my left. There was a gate there, and there was a gate that was locked with a chain. The chain, however, had a padlock on it, but it wasn't closed. It wasn't locked. The chain was pulled through the gate, on both sides of the gate, and but the padlock was hanging off of only one side of the chain. The chain wasn't connected, so anyone who wanted to could have opened that gate in the perimeter fencing. Looks to me like a security lapse, right? I mean, why would they have the chain on the gate if it wasn't supposed to be locked? And I saw a lady, she went to lean on the fence. She went to lean on the gate, and the gate swung open. And she had the same reaction I did. She grabbed it real quick and closed it and looked around like, is this okay? Shouldn't this be law? I am completely convinced that the powers that be, or that were in the US government at the time, were hoping that somebody would take a shot at President Trump. And they wanted to create a scenario in which he would likely be successful. I think that's what happened that day. I know there's a lot of theories about deeper involvement. I don't think that Mr. Crooks, the shooter, had much assistance elsewhere. I don't think he had assistance from foreign governments. Maybe Iran. I don't know, but I believe that he acted alone on that day and in the immediate lead up to that. Certainly don't believe the Israeli government had anything to do with it, because I know that's what some of you are thinking. But what I do believe is that the US government, the left, the deep state that was in control of the federal government at the time, was exposing Trump on purpose through uh, through the natural consequences of DEI and a lack of focus on excellence that comes and merit that comes to any government controlled position that is run by leftists. We see that pattern all throughout our country. But I think it was worse than that as well. I think there were people who knew that they were making decisions that were going to expose President Trump to danger. I don't think they cared. I do not think they cared. In fact, I think they were desperately hoping that someone would take a shot at him and kill him so they wouldn't have to go through the shenanigans of trying to replace Joe Biden, which they did do in almost immediate aftermath of the assassination attempt. So the rest of it went down pretty much the way you've seen if you've watched the footage. You know, I heard the shots go off. Trump was only 50 yards or so in front of me. I heard the shots go off, and my immediate reaction was, what idiot is setting off fireworks? Somebody's going to think that there are shots being fired. But at the same time, that was my subconscious brain trying to protect me from what was going on, because at the same time, I also had the thought of, those aren't fireworks. And of course, within a couple of seconds, we knew that shots were being fired, and everybody goes down, and Trump, you know, dives down, and the Secret Service piles on top of him. I can definitely attest to the fact that there was no panic. In fact, we had to keep telling people around us to stay down, stay down. People were standing up and looking around like, you know, I don't know if it was just because so many Trump supporters own guns, so they're not terrified of the concept of, I don't know, but nobody panicked. It was very calm. My primary impression was not fear, it was disbelief, which quickly gave way to anger. I quickly fired off texts to my wife and my dad, because my parents and my wife knew that I was there, and I knew that if I waited within minutes, I wouldn't be able to get a text out. So I managed to get text to both of them, shots fired, but I'm not hit. And I remember when I hit the ground, turning around, there was a large piece of farm equipment immediately in between me and where I thought the shots were coming from. So I figured I had pretty good cover. At least the line of sight was probably blocked in between me and the shooter. So I figured I was about as safe there as I could be anywhere. It turns out I was exactly right as to where the gunshots were coming from, which is really unusual. It's usually hard to tell that. I misrecalled the amount of gunshots. Somehow I pinpointed almost exactly where the gunshots were coming from. And yes, that big harvester would have been directly in between, or almost directly in between me and Mr. Crooks. So even if he had the opportunity to spray bullets into the crowd, like some people say he was attempting to do, I don't think he would have had the opportunity to fire on my immediate vicinity. So feels like God was watching out for me that day. Right away, I heard people calling for medical assistance for Corey, comparator. And for whatever reason, the thought went through my head, well, I've been certified in CPR. I should see if I go help. How is CPR going to help a gunshot wound? I don't know. But that was the thought that went through my head. So I started trying to move off to my left to the edge of the bleachers there where Corey Comparator was seated. And at that point, I caught just out of the corner of my eye Trump's fist going up in the air when he said, "Fight, fight." And I realized that he was up and moving, right, as I turned around to face him. And the rest of the crowd realized at that time that he was up and moving. And if you listen to the audio at that point, it's a pretty accurate description of the sound at that time. Um, except you don't get the idea of how loud it was. It wasn't a cheer; it was a roar. Um, and that's certainly a moment that I will never forget. I believe I did the same thing. I believe I put my fist in the air and participated in the shout where we were all expressing that we were not going to be scared away from what Trump was trying to do. So then, that all happened in 5 seconds, and I went to turn to go to see if I could help whoever had been hit. Turns out it was Corey. And I saw the medical personnel moving to his location. So at that point, I knew that I would just be getting in the way. So I went back and to where I had been waiting. And a few minutes later, I saw them carrying the stretcher that contained probably Corey's body at the time. It was very high walled, so I didn't see him, but I saw in the stretcher there was like an arm that was like an elbow, right, that had propped up very limp, and there was blood on the arm. And of course, they carried Corey out, and he did not survive. Thankfully, David Dutch and James Koppenhaver did, but their recoveries are not complete. They may never fully recover. They were grievously injured that day, and it was eye-opening for me that I had always suspected that the left was willing to commit violence, but then I knew. We have a long list of violence against Trump and the MAGA movement since then. Ryan Ralph came just 2 months after Butler, nearly got a shot at Trump as he was golfing. Thankfully, the Secret Service caught him just in time. February 2026, an armed intruder at Mar-a-Lago. He was shot and killed after driving into the security perimeter with a shotgun and a gas can. There were multiple incursions into the no-fly zone above Mar-a-Lago in March of 2026. There was the attack at the White House Correspondents' Dinner of April of this year. There was the Memorial Day of this year when a suspect opened fire at the security checkpoint at the White House. And this is just a few examples. I'm not sure what the solution is, that we have a whole political movement that is okay with the idea or even celebrates the idea of killing those that they don't agree with. We're coming up soon on the anniversary of Charlie Kirk's murder. We just went through his the trial of his alleged, the beginnings of the trial of his alleged murderer a couple weeks ago. And that attitude has not gone away. There are polls that show that many on the left think that there may be reasons, or that there are good reasons, to use political violence against their opponents. Yesterday, on the 2-year anniversary of Trump's attempted assassination, where he was clipped in the ear by an assassin's bullet, I saw someone wearing an 8647 t-shirt. I haven't been that angry in a long time, but violence never crossed my mind. The only thing that went through my mind would be the right thing to say to this despicable individual. I didn't say that. I told him that he ought to be ashamed of himself and that I hoped he had a good day, and then I left. But there was no inkling of violence in my mind, and yet here is this rank-and-file anti-Trump person celebrating the attempted murder of Donald Trump, and that resulted in the murder of Corey and the significant injuries and 2 other people, that has generated or unleashed a pattern of continued violence against people who believe this way. I don't know what the solution is. I really don't, but I can tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to continue to work hard as an early vote action coordinator, as an American, as a father, and as a husband, to convince as many people of the evils of the American left, so that the American left will lose through peaceful means and through political means, which are also peaceful. through these peaceful and political means, the things that will cause the American left to lose and continue to lose political power and societal influence. That is the only solution that I have. That and prayer. Hope that you'd be willing to join me in both. You can contact me if you're interested in volunteer work. The social media channels, Facebook, X, and are where you can contact me. This same channels that this podcast is available on. This podcast is also available on Rumble and YouTube. Thank you for watching. Please continue to like the episodes, share them, subscribe to my channels if you have not. I appreciate it. But more than that, what can you do? Always peaceful, not necessarily political, but what can you do to try to keep the violent American left from gaining political power and societal influence in our country? I'd love to help you with that if I can. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.